All right. So we are in Exodus chapter 32. If you guys want to move over there, this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to actually, this morning, we're going to read through the passage that we're going to go through. And it's quite a lengthy one. And then we'll go back and we'll start discussing it. And I suspect this will take us a few weeks, depending, of course, on how much conversation we have. Good morning, Elijah. We are in Exodus chapter 32. So, but as I was reading, I ended up going through this, and there's just so many good things in here. I was like, oh man, we gotta do this Friday morning. So that's where we're at. I'm gonna do a little series on Exodus, chapter 32, 33, and 34. So a little bit of 32, all of 33, and a little bit of 34. Just a little bit of context before we get into it. This is the book of Exodus. So the children of Israel have just left Egypt, and and this happens like right after they've left Egypt. Moses goes up to the mountain to get the 10 commandments. While he's gone, Aaron and the people think that Moses is dead, and so let's just build ourselves a new god and start worshiping it. And Moses is, or Aaron claims, hey, I just put the gold inside the fire and out came poof, a calf. And so we just started worshiping that. So this is like immediately after that golden calf, and Moses comes down and he grinds it up and makes them drink it. And so this is like right after that. So we're in chapter 32. We're going to start at verse 25. I'm going to need some people to read here. We're going to read 25 through 35. Can somebody read that? All right, Mr. Edwards, you're up. 25 through 35.
25 through 35. When Moses saw that the people were naked, for Aaron had made them naked unto their shame among their enemies, then Moses stood at the gate of the camp and said, who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And he said unto them, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. For Moses has said, consecrate yourselves to the day of the Lord, even every man upon his son and upon his brother, that he may bestow upon you a blessing this day. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses said unto the people, ye have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up unto the Lord. Peradventure, I shall make an atonement for your sin. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, oh, this people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written. And the Lord said unto Moses, whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. Therefore now go, lead the people unto the place of which I have spoken unto thee. Behold, mine angel shall go before thee. Nevertheless, in the day when I will visit their sin upon them. And the Lord plagued the people, because they made the calf which Aaron made.
Pretty rough. We're going to keep going though. We'll come back to this. So we're in chapter 33 now. Charlie, can you read verses 1 through 11?
Sure. Then the Lord said to Moses, depart and go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your descendants I will give it. And I will send my angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanite, the Amorite, the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go up in your midst, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people. And when the people heard this bad news, they mourned, and no one put on his ornaments. For the Lord said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. I will come up in your midst in one moment and consume you. Now, therefore, take off your ornaments, that I may know what to do to you. So the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments at Mount Horeb. Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Lord went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp. So it was, whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle, that all the people rose, and each man stood at his tent door and watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. And when it came to pass, Moses entered the tabernacle, that the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. All the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle door, and all the people rose and worshiped, each man in his tent door. So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend, and he would return to the camp. But his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle.
All right. Dad, could you read verses 12 through 23?
12 through 23.
Yeah,
Okay.
the rest of the chapter.
Okay, here it goes. Then Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you said, I know you by name, and you have also found grace in my sight. Now, therefore, I pray, if I have found grace in your sight, show me now your way, that I may know you and that I may find grace in your sight. And consider that this nation is your people." And he said to me, and he said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And then he said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not bring us from here. For how then will we know that your people, for now then will it be known that your people and I have found grace in your sight, except you go with us. So we shall be separate, your people and I, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth. So the Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have spoken, for you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. And then he said, please show me your glory. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. And the Lord said, here is a place by me that you shall stand on the rock. So it shall be, while my glory passes by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock and will cover you with my hand while I pass by. Then I will take away my hand and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen.
All right. And chapter 34, verses 1 through 11. March, are you up for it?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
All right. 34, 1 to 11.
that's right.
All right. And the Lord said to Moses, cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. So be ready in the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself to me there on the top of the mountain. And no man shall come up with you, and let no man be seen throughout all the mountain. Let neither flock nor herds feed before that mountain. So he cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. Then Moses rose early in the morning and went up to Mount Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him. And he took in his hand 2 tablets of stone. Now the Lord descended into the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. And the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So Moses made haste and bowed his head towards the earth and worshipped. Then he said, if now I have found grace in your sight, O Lord, let my Lord, I pray, go among us, even though we are stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. And he said, behold, I make a covenant before all your people, and I do marvels such as have not done in the earth, in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do with you. Observe what I command you this day. Behold, I am driving out before you the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Hivites and the Jebusite. That's it.
Yes, yes. Whew. I think now, currently, this is now my favorite passage in the Bible. This is awesome. This is amazing. I really, really enjoyed going through this and studying this. But just even reading it now, it's like, oh man, there's just so much good stuff here. So let's get started, I guess. You can see this whole thing that happens right after, like I mentioned, this is right after that incident with the golden calf. And so let's go back to chapter 32. We're going to start at verse 25. And we see here what this is crazy. Verse 25 and 26. 25 says, now when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them to their shame among their enemies, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me. And all the sons of Levites gathered together with him. So Moses is coming into the camp. So this is, again, he's come, he's seen what's going on. He breaks the tablets. He grinds up their golden idol and makes them drink it. But here's the thing, when all of this is going on, they're still not stopping their worship of this idol. They're still participating. And this is a fertility type of idol. So part of the fertility worship is, you know, these sexual practices that they do. We don't know exactly what they do, but what we do know is they're not stopping. And Moses is like, okay, we got to stop this now. And so he says, who's with the Lord, come with me. And so that's just a really crazy thing. And it says something interesting here. It says that in verse 25, that Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them. I find that really interesting. Aaron hadn't restrained them. So Aaron had he's just one person. He's not even the top guy, right? He's not the one who's leading them out. It's Moses and the Lord. They're leading them out of Egypt. And Aaron is there and he doesn't restrain them. He has a lot of influence over the children of Israel, but he's not using it. And I find this interesting. Do you think that this is true today? Do we have leaders who have influence over our culture, over our areas, but they don't use their influence? I mean, right? God's saying he should have stopped them, but he didn't. He just let them go on. Do you think we have leaders that do things like that today? And I'm not trying to get political. I'm just find it interesting that we have leaders. They have influence, but they don't use it. They don't use it in the right way. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that's where the term politically correct comes along. You know, not to be in politics, but you know, you don't want to restrain people because you don't want to offend them.
Yeah, this is interesting. I also want to point out verse 25. I'm sorry, verse 26. It says, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp. So he's not in the camp. He's in the entrance. Why do you think he's not in the camp? Why do you think he's just at the entrance?
Well, if the people are unrestrained, John, right? I mean, it's probably like what they call Lollapalooza, just a huge mess, and people are running around naked and dancing and all sorts of crazy, like, Moses probably like, I ain't going in there.
I like that, Lollapalooza. I don't know that
I
I've heard
think
that
he's
in quite a while.
I think he's in a position where people can see him. I think he's still up on the mountain a bit. And he can look out over the people and he can, say it. And there's a lot of people down there. So if he was in the middle of the camp, there would be a few that could see him. But what always puzzles me about this part of Exodus is Aaron. I don't understand why God didn't just knock him flat. But instead, he makes him a priest. Talk about forgiveness.
Yeah.
There is no sin you can do that God cannot forgive. If you look at Aaron and the golden calf that he built, and when Moses was gone, Aaron was kind of the spokesman for Moses.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Nowhere does it say Aaron repented, but somehow or other, he becomes a priest. I don't know. It just puzzles me.
It is interesting. Yeah, it is interesting.
Okay,
There's a lot of interesting things that happen here. Sorry, go ahead, Elijah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think he obviously knew the power of the Lord. So he's kind of, I sometimes jokingly say, if I see somebody that's, they're almost cruising for a bruising. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before, but God, like Moses knows that God could send lightning down on these people. So he's kind of want to maybe just physically distance himself for that, just because he's not sure, he's humble before the Lord and he's walking to trepidation, not sure what's going to actually happen. So it's another idea.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I think that's a good idea. I think it's a good thought. He's not at this point, he doesn't really want to be associated with the children of Israel. He is a children. He is a child. He is going to speak for them, but like they're doing some crazy stuff. And he's like, I'm not part of that.
Mhm.
But then his response even then is crazy. This is in verse 27. He says, and he said to them, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let every man put his sword on his side and go in and out from the entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother, every man his companion, every man his neighbor. That's tough. That's heavy, right?
Mhm.
Moses is saying, okay, you were for the Lord, come with me. And now your job is to get your sword, and we're just going to start all these people who are behaving crazy. We're just going to start killing them. And that is like, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's really interesting. I just want to point out a couple things here. One of the things is Moses doesn't stop and think about this. God says, you need to go out and take care of this. And Moses' response is, we're going to take care of this now. And so he's calling these people. I just find this really interesting. I want to think that in my life, if God said, hey, you need to do this right now, and it's really tough, I need you to start now, that I would just jump to attention and start. But in this situation, I wonder if I'd be like, well, let me see if I can reason with them first. Let me see if I can go speak to them and talk to them and say, hey, you guys, you got to stop this, or the hammer's coming, or the sword is coming, and that's what I would want. This is your family. This is your brothers and sisters. You don't want to go like, okay, I'm going to go kill my brother. It's going to be like, hey, whoa, bro, stop before I have to do something. But that's not what they do. They like put on the sword and they immediately jump to action and they go out there. And this is a hard thing. I don't think any of them enjoyed this at this particular point, because you're killing your family. And this is a big deal. So there's a whole bunch of things to take here. One is, this apparently is a very big deal to God because he tells them to do this. And two, this is a big deal to the Levites that they're having to do this, because this is not a fun job, but they really jump to it.
It's interesting that it was only the sons of Levi that went over to Moses' side.
Yeah.
Just, you think about that, all the different groups and people and everything else. Like, that just kind of popped out at me. Like,
No, it's an interesting thing. It's his family, it's Moses's family that jumps in and helps Moses. And so that's interesting. And it's, they've got that close tie because they feel like they are part of the family of Moses, but but still, this is not an easy job to do. And later we'll see that Moses is saying, hey, you might receive a blessing for this, which, that's not something you would expect to receive a blessing for, because that's, like I said, this is a big deal. This is rough.
yeah, I mean, go out and, go kill everybody, not like in your neighborhood, John, right?
Yeah. So here's an interesting aspect of this. In, I think it's Hebrews, that we're told that Moses is the most humble. What you see here is this humility? What do you think? Is this a humbleness of Moses for him doing this?
I think it's fair. I mean,
Okay.
up on Mount Sinai, when you think about it, God looked at Moses and said, these are your people. I'm done with them. And Moses turned around and said, they're not my people. They're your people. You're the one that brought them out of Egypt.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to make it right. I think what Moses is doing here. But I just wonder how many people were killed. And I thought I saw it in there somewhere, but I don't see
Yeah.
it now.
3,000 men.
Okay, well,
And it
there's
doesn't talk
about a
about-
million people.
Yeah, and it's not talking about the women, and it's not talking about the, all the other people that might be involved, because they weren't supposed to just kill the men. They were supposed to kill the companions and everything too. So, but 3,000 men, yeah. And there was, you're right, there's about 1 million men. So it's not a huge number, although 3,000 is still a big number.
It is.
And you can imagine how long it takes to do that too. I'm assuming this isn't a quick event. This is so, and that's an interesting point, right? Because here we have the Levites going through the camps, killing those people who are still involved in this worship of these false idols. And people must be seeing this going on, and yet they're not stopping, and they're going through the camp, and they're still just going. So it's
But it
interesting.
must have been some way to distinguish who was doing what.
Well, I think that anybody who didn't have their clothes on and was involved in a sexual act at the particular time was the person that you were going to kill.
I don't know. It's just,
But I mean, you're right? They had to have a way to distinguish them. And maybe there was some people who were on the gray line where they're like, I'm not sure, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but the guy next to you, I'm sure about, and I'm taking him out. Yeah, that's
maybe they
interesting.
fought him. Maybe they fought back. I don't know.
I'm curious where the Levi's were the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
what were they doing? Like, were they like trying to stop the whole thing? And were they like not participating, or were some of them participating? That I would love to kind of like get an insight on that eventually one day. You get to heaven and you ask, but what were they doing? Or were they like some of them participating, and then when Moses came, did they come and go, oh snap, we gotta course correct?
Well, we do know about one Levite in particular, and that's Aaron. And we do know he's not doing anything. He's just like, I'm washing my hands. You guys do whatever you're going to do. Yeah. So I suspect it's the same type of thing, but maybe you're right. Maybe when Moses come, they're like, oh, we got to do something now.
Well, of all those people there, John, it may be that a portion of them were worshiping this golden calf and a portion of them weren't. I don't know. I mean, it's a puzzling part of the Bible to me. It really is. I have no problems with Genesis, but Exodus trying to understand how Moses could lead 1 million people through the wilderness and across the Red Sea. And it just scratches my head. And I'm sure it's explainable. And I'm sure when I get to heaven, it'll be like, oh yeah, okay, that all makes sense now. But right now, for me, Exodus is a big question mark in my head. But
I think we might get to some of that in this passage, but you do bring up a good point, and so I want to make sure that we're clear. If you read this before this passage, Moses does take care of the idol, and he grinds up the idol and he makes them drink it. He grinds it up into powder, he makes them drink it. So to some extent, some of the people there are seeing what's going on, and they are stopping. But what we see is some of them are not stopping. Some of them are just going to keep going. And that's when Moses is feeling like, okay, or maybe that's not the right characterization. Maybe it's when God's like, we got to take care of this. They're not stopping. Because that's what we see how this passage starts with, is they are unrestrained. So some of them have stopped, but some of them, they're just keep going. And so they're at the point where it's like, okay, we're trying to stop, but they're not stopping. So we got to force them to stop.
Yeah.
Bill, you look like you have something you want to say.
No, it's just to apologize. Somebody distracted me with something they wrote. But
All right.
sorry, teacher, not paying attention.
You're fired. All right.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say, one of the things I was looking at is how it's judgment as opposed to something vindictive. So, when they're going in there, it's more of a judgment on the behavior, and you're going in because God has ordained you to go in and do this job essentially. And so, I'm working on the behalf of the Lord, to exercise judgment on this. I can only imagine what they saw. I don't think it was just anything that was just out of the ordinary. I think it was something out of the extraordinary, and they can interpret or maybe understand that God wanted judgment on that behavior or acts, and it was more of a judgment as opposed to a vindictive thing. So maybe that might have helped them when they had to go in there and judge all those individuals rather than kill them. We really just judge them.
Yeah. And before this, God is saying, hey, I'm going to go destroy them. And Moses is like, hold on, let me take care of it. So this is Moses, jumping in there, take care of this before God has to get in there and take care of it. Because when God has to get in there, it's going to be a lot bigger. It's going to be there's going to be a lot more casualties. And so Moses, in a way, this is grace, which doesn't sound like grace, but it is, because God's allowing them to take care of this sin before he has to go step in and take care of the sin.
Well, one thing I find interesting is there's no mention, or at least I didn't see it or hear it, that they fight back in any way. So it's amazing. And obviously that's probably no need to describe that or talk about it, because once God made that judgment, they sort of took their medicine, if you will. But I still find that amazing that they turned from him, but somehow they didn't fight back. And maybe they did, and there's no reason to mention it, but it just is extremely interesting that 3,000 people, there's just not one mention. It's just.
I suspect that because they're in the middle of these acts, they're just defenseless and unprepared. But you are right. I mean, maybe they did fight back, but when you got somebody you're not wearing anything and you're not, you got nothing, and somebody else has a sword and they come at you, what are you going to do? But it's a good point. We don't know. It's not, we're going to have to find out eventually how this worked out.
You just got to think about this, Bill. He's got to think, peace out, man.
well, most of these carousing people were probably drunk too,
Right.
It might have been. Yeah.
my guess.
But what's kind of interesting that Moses burned up the calf and grounded it and then had him drink it. And then in 25, he kind of, it's kind of like, it feels backwards in a way, because this is in 25, all of a sudden now when Moses saw the people were unrestrained, right? You're kind of like, oh, didn't you see that they were unrestrained when you were making them drink the stuff? But I don't know, right?
I mean, it's interesting. I agree, but it's kind of cool that first he takes care of the idol, and then he takes care of the idolaters. So you might feel like it should be the other way around, but maybe in God's perspective, it's first pull down that idol and then take care of those who are worshiping that false idol. But I don't know. I mean, it is interesting.
I was just curious on why he was like all of a sudden kind of
Yeah.
surprised that they were unrestrained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big crowd. There's a lot of noise. I agree. Yeah. The way this whole thing is handled is not how I probably would have handled it unless the Lord said, this is how you do it. And so, but apparently that's what happened. So this is interesting. So, okay, let's see. What verse did we leave off at? 27. Did we read 27? Let's see. Yeah, we read that. So we're at verse 29. It says, I'm sorry, verse 30. It says, now it came to pass on the next day that Moses, let's see. Now it came to pass on the next day that Moses said to the people, you have committed a great sin. So now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. And then Moses returned to the Lord and said, oh, these people have committed a great sin and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sins, but if not, I pray, blot me out in your book, which you have written. And the Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Now, therefore, go, lead the people to the place which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin. So the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made. There's a whole bunch of really interesting things going on here. First of all, it says on verse 30, now it came to pass on the next day that Moses said to the people, you have committed a great sin. I just want to bring this up. This is the next day. So there's a pause of time. Moses takes care of business, and then the next day he goes to go talk with God. So there's this little break here. And I find this really interesting because when God tells Moses, I want you to take care of this right now, he does it. He's like, okay, if you're with God, come with me, grab your swords, we're going to do this now. And so he hops to action. It's not like Moses takes his time. When God tells him to do something, he just jumps to it. But then there's this pause between him taking care of business and then the next day where he goes to talk with God. There's this pause of time. And I find this, I really like this because I can't imagine all of the emotion, all of the tiredness, all of, you've got to wash yourself off because you're covered in blood, all of that that's going on. And they take a break after that and they take a pause. Now, they don't take a long pause. They're not like, okay, let's wait a week and calm ourselves down. But there still is an immediate pause where they're like, we got to calm ourselves down and then go talk with the Lord. And so I think that it's really interesting. And I just want to point that out. There's a pause, but it's not a long pause. It's just enough of a pause for them to collect themselves and get together. And this isn't because it isn't urgent. This is just this is just the way it worked out. And I kind of like that. And I like the fact that when God tells Moses to do something, he just does it. But then there's this period of time here where he's like, I'm not sure what to do. How do we move forward? Okay, we better go talk with God on how we move forward here. So I like that. And then Moses says something really interesting here. He says in verse 30, perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. What do you think he means by making atonement for your sin?
Well, doesn't he kind of offer himself to God if he chooses as a living sacrifice, as maybe snuff me out if it will spare a million people, or however maybe he doesn't know how many more God's gonna require for this like really bad sin.
Yeah. And that's interesting, right? We have somebody who's saying, they're sinners, they're terrible sinners. Instead of punishing them for their sin, forgive them for their sin, and I will take their punishment. Kill me instead. So we have Moses doing this, which is a great picture of Jesus. However, what's really important here is it's not going to work. This is just Moses. And God's like, nope, you are not a suitable atonement for the children of Israel. They're going to have to pay for their own sins. And so there's this really cool picture here of somebody attempting to atone for the sins of others. And he is a great guy. Moses is amazing and awesome, but he's not good enough to atone them for their sins. And that's really interesting. But what we find is in the New Testament, we get Jesus, who is perfect, and he is enough to atone us for our sins. So there's this great distinction here. No matter how great you think Moses is, he wasn't good enough to atone them for their sins. So it's really cool here what he says here. So it is interesting too, where God says in verse 38, he says to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Now go, therefore, lead the people to the place. Oh wait, was it wait, did we not get to that passage yet? Let's see.
33,
No.
John?
Yeah, that's right.
It's 33.
Yeah, okay. Whoever sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. So I just find this really interesting that everyone is responsible for their own sin. Here's what God is saying. If they've sinned, they're the ones who are going to have to deal with the consequences of their sin. And then he says this, I'm going to blot them out of my book. What do you think his book is? I find this whole concept interesting about this book. And there's throughout the Bible, there's other references to a book or the book of life or these things. But what do you think is this book?
Can only assume it's the book of life.
Okay. And what do you think it means to have your name blotted out of the book of life?
Going to the tough situation. You're going to be judged and go to hell if you're not in the book of life.
Okay. Yeah. This is interesting. He doesn't actually say it's the book of life. He says that he'll blot him out of his book, which it totally could be the book of life. I'm not saying that. I just find this really interesting that God's got records. He's taking track of things. And you would think that if this is a book of judgment type of deal, that getting your name removed from it would be like, okay, that's a good thing. But this is not a good thing, getting your name blotted out. So I'm tempted to think that this isn't necessarily a book of judgment. And I've been taking track of all of the different things you've been doing. But I wonder if maybe this is his book. When he's talking about his book, it's his history, his plan for salvation of mankind, his plan for all of everything. And he's saying, I'm going to blot you out. And then that means that you're not part of God's plan. And I just find this interesting because if you look at classified material, you know how when they'll declassify some material, they'll redact parts of it, right? And they'll blot out. I mean, literally, you'll see the document and there'll be these big black strips over particular things. And the idea is they blot out particular names and particular events. So you can't figure out who actually participated. You can't get some of the details that you want. And what's really interesting is if all that's left is the redacted material, after a period of time when all the people involved in that event die, you have no record of some of the details of what happened. They're gone, they're forgotten. And so I wonder if this is like God's redacting people from history. They're like, I'm going to blot you out of my book. And in eternity, people aren't going to remember what exactly the details were of that. They're just going to know I had this plan and this is how my plan was accomplished. But these little details, you guys are gone. we're just forgetting about you. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think, but I just find this fascinating, that blotting out us from this book, what it could possibly mean.
Well, if they were blotted out, John, they had to be in it first. They had to be listed in it in order to blot them out of it. I mean, it's not like the book of life, you accept the Lord and then your name is added to the book of life. But
So
in
you're
this
saying
book,
you're saying this book is a list of names of people who are going to live forever. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I don't know what it is. I'm saying it's
I-
a book and the name's in the books because the name had to be in the books in order for it, the name to be blotted out of the books.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I don't know what it is. It's not the book of life because your name is added to the book of life when you accept the Lord.
Maybe.
As I see it.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't know, but
I don't know either.
but if it's God who exists outside of time, I don't know how that works.
I don't either.
Well,
I just
what-
know that he's God.
Oh,
He's God Almighty and he's Lord and he's in control and he's coming back. And normal's never coming back, but Jesus is coming back. That's what I know.
there you go.
What,
Do,
what,
do you
what-
think? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Charlie.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's related to sin though, and obedience. So that's what's kind of curious because it's not just necessarily history or whatever, right? Because because it deals with forgiveness of sins.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit more weightier. It's not just like, hey, this is the book that help you go to an entrance to the promised land. It's more than that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. But what really takes my attention is Paul kind of talks this way too later in Romans, right? When he's like, if there's a way that we can switch, even for me, from my brethren. So I love this, the mind and the heart that God has placed on people who are, whether it's in leadership or in key positions, where God has melted their hearts into the ministry or to the people that they're shepherding. Because here Moses is like willing, it's inconceivable that he would go, just blot me out then, if I could save these guys, or if you could switch them. And Paul speaks the same way. And I think it's a trend for everybody who God has called into some sort of related ministry, where you feel attached or melted into the people, where you're like, I want to be able to do what I can so that, we can do a trade or something. I don't know. I'm helpless here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that too. That's good. And you're right. It's not just history, right? There's definitely consequences, an eternal consequence of being removed from this book. So it's a big deal. It's just I'm curious what this book is. Is it just a list of names? Is there more to this book? Is there a plot? Is it a story, or is it just record keeping? I'm curious.
Do you think back then, I mean, if God was writing on stone tablets, do you think they even knew what a book was?
To that point, Moses is the one that brings up the book. If I read that right,
Yeah. No, you're right.
Moses brings up the book, so Moses already has a knowledge of the book.
Yep.
And then God obviously puts his, comment, I will blot out of my book. So it's interesting that Moses brought it up first to
That's true.
preemptively get his attention to say, look, take me, not them, forgive them. And obviously, Charlie, to your point, they didn't have quote books. They had tablets. That's about the best they had. Although in Egypt, they had books. In Egypt, they had
They did.
parchment and this and that. So they knew what books were. They just didn't have it out in the desert, obviously.
They did. Yeah. And they
Anyway.
had papyrus over in Egypt, and they had the
Yeah,
codex and all that stuff. So that,
Yeah.
from his upbringing and what we think is his upbringing is he's upper class, as a child, privileged, he would have been exposed to those types of things. But and all of this is fascinating, and there are times when I'm like, oh, I really want to get some of these details, but we don't want to miss the main point of this, which is Moses saying, hey, put their sin on me and take me instead. And God saying, no, that's not going to work. Everybody has to deal with the consequences of their sin.
Amen.
We have 5 minutes left. Do we try to get to this last section? 7 minutes. We can try it. We can try it. Verse 34, it says, now therefore go, lead the people to the place which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit you for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin. So the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made. So here we see that God's like, okay, they were disobedient, but he's still saying, look, there's still the promise of the promised land. And Moses and Israel, your job is still to get over to that promised land, and I want you to go do it. And then he's like, and I'm giving you a bonus. There's an angel that I'm sending in front of you, and he's going to go and prepare the way for you. And so if I'm hearing this, I'm like, oh, wow, that is amazing. You're still having grace. You're still having mercy. You're giving us the promised land. You're going out before us. And then he says, but when I come visit you for punishment, you're going to get punished. And then he says, and then he gave him a plague. And you're like, oh, that's not sounding so great anymore. So there's this really interesting thing that happens where God talks about these two things at the same time of there's still the promised land. He's still going to keep his promise. He's going to send his angel before them, but he's also going to visit them for punishment. And I want to, oh man, we don't have enough time. So maybe we'll have to talk about this next week too. But what's really interesting here is he says he's going to send my angel. He says, behold, my angel shall go before you. Now, I want to point this out, that angel is a job. An angel is a messenger. And so when we see this word angel throughout the scriptures, we have to realize that an angel is a messenger. Sometimes it talks about a supernatural being. Sometimes it talks about a pastor. Sometimes it talks about a person. Sometimes it talks about God himself. But it's a job. And the job is to bring a message. So that's his job. So he's saying, I'm going to send my angel before you. What do you think is the message of this angel that he's sending before them?
This is the way to go.
Okay.
I'm reminded of the pillar of fire that led them.
Mm-hmm. And it's still leading them.
Yeah, it's saying this is the way to go. That's the message, Steve.
And we'll get to it a little bit later too, because God says he's going to do something to the people that are already in the land. But I just really think that this is interesting. He's sending his angel before them and this messenger before them. And the message seems to be, these people are the children of the only true God. That seems to be the message. And so as they're getting closer to the land of Canaan, and before they move in, we find that when we read that a lot of them are scared because they recognize that God is with them. They received the message that these are the children of God. These are the ones that God is protecting, and he's leading them and he's guiding them. So that seems to be the message, is that these are the people of God. Now, I don't know if that's the only message. There might be more.
It's interesting, John, in 35, that says, and the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf, which Aaron made. And to me, that sounds like there were some that kind of got away with it, that the sons of Levi didn't slaughter, that they didn't kill. But those that kind of slid underneath and hid or whatever, or thought they got away with it, they didn't.
Yeah.
They were
so
plagued.
We'll talk about that next week too. There's some interesting things that happen in the next passage that deal with that. So we'll get there.
Okay.
But it's a good point. Before we do that though, I want to point out one other thing that's really interesting. And again, still in verse 34. It says, Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in that day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin. So here's the interesting thing. He's going to send their angel ahead. He's going to send his angel ahead of them. But when he visits Israel, he's going to punish Israel. So there's this interesting aspect of God saying, I'm going to send my messenger ahead of you, but when I visit you, there's trouble coming.
This, but you know, it's kind of, look at the timeline. Okay, Moses sent the Levites out. They killed 3,000 men, and how many other people they killed?
Mhm.
And then, you know, go ahead and go. And then he leaves them with a plague. And then God says, when I come in there, I'm really going to clean out. So you kind of wonder, like, the layers of sin, so to say, or whatever. You know, he just to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This might be a nit, John, but in the version I have, it says we'll visit their sin upon them. It doesn't use such a strong word as punish.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's a
Except for the
nuance.
next verse, right? Except for the next verse, which says he'll send a plague on them.
Right, right. But it's just interesting the verbiage. You know, the plague, and the Lord plagued the people. But that's an immediate. Well, I guess I read what you were reading as after the plague. So what Charlie just said, unless I misunderstood. Are we saying the plague is it and that's done, or he's coming again after the plague to in essence, your words, punish / again? I just want to make sure I understood.
And it's really interesting. I was going to ask what you guys think the plague is, because if you recall, they just left Egypt, and Egypt had a whole bunch of plagues, right? And they were some pretty bad plagues. They had flies, they had darkness, they had a plague where firstborns were killed. I mean, they had hailstones, they had no plagues. And then God says, and I'm going to plague you. That's pretty serious. And I don't know what the plague is that he did. What we do know is that by the time they hit the land of Canaan, none of these people are alive anymore. You know, in 40 years, they're all going to die. So, but there's some other things that happen in the meantime too. So I don't know what that plague is. I find it really interesting. If you guys know what the plague is, I'd love to hear what it is. But what we do know is, like I said, none of them survive. I mean, we got Joshua, we got Caleb. Moses dies before they get in, and then we got Joshua and Caleb. They're the only survivors that we have records of from this particular time period. So is it possible? So we'll get a little bit more into this. We're running out of time. We'll get into more of this next week because he talks about this a little bit more too. But it is possible that, you know, God's got two, and I want to say conflicting, they're not, but I want to say he's got two conflicting goals. He's promised them the land of Canaan. He's promised that he's going to get them over there, and he's going to kill them all. So how do you do that, right? If you go and you just kill them all, you can't fulfill the second promise of getting him in there. So God's going to do this thing where they're going to spend 40 years out in the wilderness. And again, there's another sin that they commit that is part of this as well. But they're going to spend 40 years out in the wilderness where they're going to slowly, and I say slowly, but it's not, because when you kill 1 million people within 40 years, that's 1 million men. That's still pretty quick. But he's going to do it so in a way where the older generation dies, but the younger generation grows up and gets to have fear of the Lord. So he's going to do it in a way that's not slow, because it's still fairly quick, but it's not immediate, because if he did that, then he can't fulfill the second promise of getting him to the land of Canaan. So he's going to do this in this interesting way. So I wonder if the plague, you know, is this, it's not, is part of it immediate and a whole bunch of people immediately die? It's quite possible. And then is part of it slow where they take longer to die? I mean, I don't know how that all worked out, but what we do know is they don't make it. Any last comments? We're a little over time, but we have time for one more comment. Somebody has something really important. All right. We didn't even get as far as I expected us to get. So I don't know how many weeks this is going to take us to get through this. Come on, guys. But I'm like, I got to tell you, almost every single time I read this whole passage, I'm like, oh, wow, there's something there I didn't see since last time, which I read it yesterday and I didn't see that. There's just there's a lot of really good stuff in here. We're going to get to some of that too. All right, let's pray. I'll close this out. Lord Jesus, we just thank you for who you are. We thank you that you can atone for our sins, Lord. We thank you that we don't have to pay the consequences of that, but that you have paid it. And we don't understand what that means, Lord. We don't understand the fullness of what it meant for you to humble yourself in that way and to take our sin upon you. But we do know that we are grateful for that because it was amazing and it was incredible. We love this passage where we get to see someone like Moses who isn't good enough to atone for us, but you are. And so we recognize just how perfect that you are and amazing you are. So we ask that as we go through this week and this weekend, Lord, that you would just remind us how much you loved us and how much you loved us because you atoned for our sin and took that upon yourself. And in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John.
guys.
Have an amazing weekend, brothers.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. See you guys Sunday. Bye.
See
Sunday.
ya.
Sounds good. All right, man. See you guys.